Now we are moving on with another topic, that is invoice and time of supply. Invoice and time of supply, that's it, 7. So look into the next area. This invoice and time of supply is mostly a topic what you need to remember. You need to remember because mainly for time of supply provisions. So they will be giving lot of transactions in a particular question. So for the transaction, whether it comes in that month or not, whether time of supply for the transaction comes in that month or not, for that only you need to know this chapter. Because if time of supply do not come in that particular month, then we don't have to pay GST. For example, you get one line here, that is advance received during January 2020 with respect to services for which invoice is raised in February 2020. Compute the GST payable. Heading is February 2020. Now will this advance be taxed in February 2020? No, the advance will not be taxed in Feb 2020. It would have already been taxed in Jan 2020 because the time of supply in case of services is on the date on which payment is received or invoice is raised, whichever is earlier. So therefore they would have already taxed it in January. So it should not be taxed in February. You understood or not? Or for interest computation also it can be asked. That is, a person is required to pay GST. That is, he collected advance, and for that advance GST is discharged on 31st March. Advance is collected in January 2020. So now for January 2020 advance, what will be the time limit for payment of GST? When it should be paid? By 20th of the next month. They need to pay GST. But they are paying GST on which date? 31st March. So there will be like interest that is payable. So mainly this invoice and time of supply chapter is useful for that purpose as to in which month the particular transaction will be taxable. Okay. Now there are few sections which are connected to this time of supply. 3 sections. Section 12 deals with time of supply in case of goods. Section 13 deals with time of supply in case of services, and section 14 time of supply in case of change in rate. But this time of supply in turn depends upon the due date of invoice. So that is given in section 31. So wherever time of supply we come across, for example, time of supply in case of goods covered under forward charge mechanism, we need to take due date of invoice or actual date of invoice, whichever is earlier. So actual date of invoice is the date on which you give invoice, but due date of invoice, how to determine? So anyhow you need to refer to section 31. So that's the reason why first we are completing section 31, due date of invoice, and then we will see what is the time of supply and what is the objective of time of supply. Time of supply is to determine the due date of payment of GST. So if you see objectives of time of supply, objectives of time of supply is to determine due date of payment of GST. To determine due date of payment of GST, because if for a transaction time of supply falls in a month and that GST we need to discharge by next month GSTR 3B due date. Okay. And to determine exchange rate, just now we have seen. So that is in value of supply we have seen as per rule 35, sorry, rule 34. So in case when the transaction is denominated in foreign currency, to determine the exchange rate, time of supply is relevant. To determine exchange rate. And third, to determine rate of GST. To determine rate of GST. At the time of collecting advance, there is one rate. But at the time of raising invoice, there is one rate. Which rate is relevant? So if time of supply is invoice, that rate is only relevant. And at the time of collection of advance, we have one rate, that rate is only relevant. So mainly time of supply is relevant for determining the rate at which we need to pay GST for that purpose. Okay. And these are the 3 objectives of time of supply: to determine the due date of payment of GST, to determine the exchange rate, and to determine the rate of GST. And time of supply is dependent upon the due date of invoice. So what is taken as the due date of invoice? We have total 6 provisions related to due date of invoice. In case of goods, 3 provisions: subsection 147, 31 subsection 1, 31 subsection 4, and 31 subsection 7. In case of services, we have subsection 256. So 31 subsection 2, 31 subsection 5, and 31 subsection 6. So when which situation is applicable? Let's try to understand goods first. In case of goods, if it is continuous supply of goods, due date of invoice is determined under section 31 subsection 4. In case of sale on approval or on return basis, due date of invoice is determined under section 31 subsection 7. What is the meaning of continuous supply of goods? There will be successive supply of goods for which the payments are settled on a periodical basis. That can be through pipeline, wire or any other conduit, etc. For example, I am laying down a pipeline from my factory to your factory to supply the chemicals. So now I will be supplying chemicals and you will be using. I will fix a meter on a monthly basis or a quarterly basis. I will be collecting from you as to how much is used based on that. So that is known as continuous supply of goods. Okay. So there will be successive supply of goods for which the payments are settled on a periodical basis. In case of continuous supply of goods, what will be taken as the due date of invoice? As and when the payments are received, or as the case may be, account statement is issued. Suppose if the contract is such that in case of this pipeline chemicals which are being sent, if I am receiving the ad hoc money every month 2 lakhs I receive, and the differential if any will be settled on a quarterly basis. So 2 lakhs and 2 lakhs I will be receiving on a monthly basis. Whenever I receive, that will be taken as the due date of invoice for 2 lakh rupees. For the differential amount, say the differential amount is some 30,000 rupees. For that I will give an account statement. So whenever I give account statement, that will be taken as the due date of invoice. Okay. So first we are discussing continuous supply of goods, section 31 subsection 4. Due date of invoice is the date on which account statement is issued or payment is received, as the case may be. If the payments are received first, that is if the payments are received irrespective of the account statement, so that payment received date. If the payment is received based on account statement, the account statement date. Okay. Then in case of sale on approval or on return basis. Sale on approval or on return basis means first I will hand over the product to the recipient. If he likes it, he will continue to use it and it is considered as sale. The day when he accepts it, I will raise the invoice. Suppose if he is not accepting within 6 months, then the date on which 6 months is over will be taken as the deemed supply. So therefore, the due date of invoice is at the time of acceptance by the recipient, that is the date on which supply takes place, or 6 months from the date of removal, whichever is earlier. 6 months from the date of removal or date of supply. What is taken as the date of supply? Date of acceptance by buyer, whichever is earlier. Okay. So within 6 months, if you accept, that date will be taken as the due date of invoice. If he is not accepting within 6 months, then on expiry of 6 months, it is considered as due date of invoice and we need to give invoice at that time. Then normal cases, section 31 subsection 1, normal cases. When normal cases is applicable, when 31 subsection 4 or 31 subsection 7 is not applicable, then 31 subsection 1 will be applicable. Okay. So if it is not continuous supply of goods, if it is not sale on approval or on return basis, then 31 subsection 1 normal cases is applicable. We need to check whether supply involves movement of goods or supply does not involve movement of goods. If supply involves movement of goods at the time of removal, if supply does not involve movement of goods at the time of delivery, that is the due date of invoice. When I say due date, that is the due date. You can give invoice even before that date also. It does not mean we need to give invoice only on that date. Okay. Now, what is the meaning of supply involving movement of goods? Under a contract of supply, the goods are moved from one location to another location. Example, you take Amazon and Flipkart. When you place an order in Amazon and Flipkart, so till the time you receive, the contract is not completed, correct or not? So the contract is terminated at your place. The supply is terminated at your place. Under the contract of supply, goods are starting from one location to another location. That is known as supply involving movement of goods. Supply does not involve movement of goods. For example, you are coming to my location, purchase the goods and taking. So you may be taking the goods. There may be movement of goods, but the supply is already terminated. So supply does not involve movement of goods. If supply involves movement of goods, at the time I twitch, I remove the goods from my location, that will be taken as the due date of invoice. I need to accompany that goods with invoice. Suppose if supply does not involve movement of goods, at the time when I hand over the product to you, that is time of delivery, I should have given the invoice. That is the due date of invoice in normal cases for goods. So for goods we completed section 31 subsection 1, section 31 subsection 4 and section 31 subsection 7. Then in case of services, so today actually we completed our agenda of 3 topics, that is search, seizure, confiscation, offences, penalties and prosecution, value of supply. So this is another topic bonus that we are completing. We'll try to complete it. Okay. So because I just wanted to discuss as much as I can in the live, and thereafter, so remaining portion I will record and I will share. Okay, but the total I will ensure that it is within 18 hours. Okay, then services section 31 subsection 2 normal cases, subsection 2, 5 and 6. Subsection 2 deals with normal cases, subsection 5 in case of continuous supply of service, and subsection 6 cessation of service. So what is a continuous supply of service? A service which takes more than 3 months to complete and involves periodic payment obligations. Again I am repeating, more than 3 months to complete and involves periodic payment obligation. Suppose if it takes more than 3 months to complete but the lump sum payment is received, okay, then it is not a continuous supply of service. Even though it takes more than 3 months, but the payment is only single payment, it is not a continuous supply of service, it will be treated like a normal service. Suppose, if it involves installment payment, but it is not taking more than 3 months, then also it is not a continuous supply of service. Both the conditions should be satisfied. What are both the conditions? First, it should take more than 3 months to complete and it should involve periodic payment obligations. Then only it is continuous supply of service. In case of continuous supply of service, we need to check whether due date of installment is ascertainable from the contract. For example, I am a contractor who entered into contract with you to construct a property and it will take more than 3 months to complete the construction, and the contract price is 20 lakhs and that 20 lakhs is payable in installments. Okay, so it is a continuous supply of service. Whether that installment date is given in the contract, yes, so that installment date is the due date of invoice for that amount, for that installment amount. That installment date itself will be taken as the due date of invoice. Suppose the installment date is not given in the contract, but the installment is linked to completion of an event. That is, upon completion of foundation you have to pay this much, upon completion of the first floor you have to pay this much, upon completion of second floor you have to pay this much, upon plastering you have to pay this much, upon painting you have to pay this much. Like that I am fixing the event. So whenever that event is completed, so that date will be taken as the due date of invoice. Suppose if there is neither installment date mentioned in the contract nor the event mentioned in the contract, then as and when the installment amount is received, that will be taken as the due date of invoice. This is in case of continuous supply of services. You understood or not? See that? So due date of installment ascertainable from the contract, such due date of installment not ascertainable from the contract, as and when the payment is received. If due date of installment is linked to completion of an event, as and when the event is completed, that should be taken. Okay. And section 31 subsection 6 cessation of services. I cannot stop myself without discussing this example. So listen, there is one coaching center. That coaching center collected fees from students and that coaching center did not take classes and it ran away, and the teachers of that coaching center also ran away. So now in that case, so whatever money that is being received, so cessation of service, abruptly they are stopping the service. So in that case, immediately upon cessation, they should have given the invoice. Got it? So the due date of invoice is immediately upon cessation with respect to the proportionate amount retained. Suppose if any amount is retained by not rendering the service, for that amount, they need to give invoice immediately after cessation. Okay. That is this section 31 subsection 6. Whereas section 31 subsection 2 normal cases. Normal cases is applicable when 31 subsection 5 and 31 subsection 6 is not applicable. That is, it is not a continuous supply of service. It is not cessation of service. Normal cases. Now you check whether it is banking service or insurance services. In case of banking service and insurance services, 45th day from the date of completion will be taken as the due date of invoice. Means within 45 days you can give the invoice. 45 days from the date of completion. Suppose if it is other than banking or insurance, 30 days from the date of completion. So this will be taken as the due date of invoice here. Okay. So you just write down what is a continuous supply of service. A service which takes more than more than 3 months to complete, and involves periodic payment obligations. Okay, so then it will be known as a continuous supply of service. Done. Then next year. So what we have seen so far is the due date of invoice, and now time of supply in case of goods or services. So I told you due date of invoice is connected to time of supply. So what will be taken as the time of supply? First, we should see time of supply in case of goods is given under 12. In case of services, it is given under 13. So we have certain shaded area, that is the provision will be same, let it be 12 or let it be 13. First, section 12 subsection 1 and 13 subsection 1. So it says that if you want to determine the liability to pay GST, you need to determine on the basis of time of supply. So the date when the transaction's time of supply is there, that date only the liability arises. Okay. And section 12 subsection 2 and 13 subsection 2 deals with time of supply in case of FCM. Goods FCM 12.2, service FCM 13.2, and goods RCM 12.3, services RCM 13.3, and 12.4 and 13.4 common time of supply in case of vouchers. 12.5, 13.5 common time of supply in case of residuary when the time of supply cannot be determined as per any of the above subsections. And 13 subsection 6 and 12 subsection 6, that is interest or late fee or penalty, what will be taken as the time of supply. Okay, so just this one page, if you remember, the time of supply is over in case of 12 and 13. First 12.2, let's complete 12. So 12.2 is time of supply in case of goods covered under FCM. What is it we need to do? We need to take actual date of invoice or due date of invoice, whichever is earlier. So which means whether we need to pay GST on advances, we don't have to pay GST on advances. Suppose if it is goods which are covered under FCM, we received advance this month, but the invoice is raised after 2 months at the time when the supply takes place. So now in that case, so that after 2 months only the liability will arise, not now. So even if we received any advance, we don't have to pay GST on that advance right now. Okay. So this will be taken, that is time of supply will be due date of invoice or actual date of invoice, whichever is earlier. So there is no GST on advances. But this is applicable for a person other than those opting for composition scheme. So for a person who is opting for composition scheme, this is not applicable, dear. Okay. This is not applicable for a person who is opting for composition scheme. Okay, let's see that. 1 second. So listen. So this is only to a person other than those opting for composition scheme. Other than opting for composition scheme. Other than opting for composition scheme. Okay. What about a person who is opting for composition scheme? With respect to a person opting for composition scheme, with respect to a person opting for composition scheme, okay, with respect to a person opting for composition scheme, what should be taken as the time of supply? So the time of supply will be due date of invoice or actual date of invoice or date of payment, whichever is earlier. Okay, so we need to take actual date of invoice or due date of invoice or date of payment, whichever is earlier. Whichever is earlier will be taken. You understood or not? Sir, when a person is opting for composition scheme, due date of invoice or actual date of invoice or date of payment, whichever is earlier, which means a person opting for composition scheme is required to pay GST on advances with respect to the goods. Yes, they need to pay GST on advances with respect to the goods. A person who is not opting for composition scheme, only actual date of invoice or due date of invoice, whichever is earlier. And therefore a person who is opting for composition scheme, what they need to do is that on advances they need to pay GST. So whatever is the bill of supplies that they have raised for this quarter and whatever is the advances received during this quarter, everything should be taken for the purpose of payment of the composite tax. Okay. Then in case of goods covered under RCM, in case of goods covered under RCM. So what will be taken as the time of supply? The date on which goods are received, or the date on which payment is made to supplier, or 31st day from the date of invoice, whichever is earlier. Okay, the date on which goods are received by the recipient, or the date on which payment is made to supplier, or 31st day from the date of invoice, whichever is earlier will be taken. And if you see, 12 subsection 3 is discussed from the recipient perspective. So recipient when he is making payment, or recipient when he received the goods, or 31st day from the date of invoice, what if supplier is not giving invoice? Any other document given by the supplier will be taken to count that 31st day. Whichever is earlier will be taken as the time of supply in case of recipient. Whether GST payable on advances, of course, wherever date of payment is one of the date, then while determining time of supply, wherever date of payment is one of the date, they need to pay GST on that amount, advances. Okay, because if payment is one of the date, whichever is earlier, payment date also will come now. So therefore that will be taken as the time of supply. So GST payable on advances. If goods returned after 6 months, can credit note be issued by the supplier? Yes. So in case of sale on approval or on return basis, we will be deeming it as supply after expiry of 6 months. But thereafter, say 8th month, they have returned the goods. In that case, the supplier already raised the invoice now. So the supplier will be giving a credit note in case of sales returns. Okay. So already whatever GST that is paid, that liability will come down, and if recipient has taken any ITC, that will be reversed. Now, so this is 12 subsection 3. Now in case of goods, FCM, due date of invoice or actual date of invoice, whichever is earlier. If it is composition scheme, due date of invoice or actual date of invoice, or date of payment, whichever is earlier. In case of goods covered under RCM, the date on which goods are received, or the date on which payment is made to supplier, or 31st day from the date of invoice, whichever is earlier. Okay. Then in case of services covered under FCM, it will be so if invoice is given within the due date, then we will take actual date of invoice or date of payment, whichever is earlier. Okay. So what is that we will do? We will take date of invoice. So if invoice is given within the due date of invoice or date of payment, whichever is earlier will be taken. Okay. So then this line is not required. If invoice is not given within due date, then date of completion or date of payment, whichever is earlier, should be taken. Okay. That is, if invoice is given within due date, invoice date or payment date, whichever is earlier. If invoice is not given within due date, then completion date or payment date, whichever is earlier, will be taken. Okay. So therefore date of completion also will become the time of supply. This is in case of 13.2. So what is the due date of invoice? Refer 31 subsection 2, subsection 5 or subsection 6. So if invoice is given within 30 days or 45 days or not, we need to check. If given within time limit, then invoice date or payment date. Otherwise completion date or payment date, whichever is earlier. Then 13 subsection 3, in case of RCM, time of supply in case of RCM. So in case of RCM, only 2 dates. The date on which recipient makes payment to the supplier, or 61st day. Instead of 31st day, it will be 61st day from the date of invoice, whichever is earlier. So these are the 4 points you need to remember. Goods FCM, goods RCM, service FCM, services RCM. So between goods and services, we have difference in provisions only in this place. But in the next 3 provisions, the goods or services, the provision will remain the same. So now, in exam, what you need to do is that just to see the checklist. Is it goods or services? If it is goods, 12. If it is services, 13. Then again, is it FCM or RCM? If it is RCM, it should be specified for goods, because goods under RCM is not in syllabus. So if it is RCM goods, it should be specified, then apply RCM provision. Otherwise, FCM. Services, you should learn what are the services which are covered under RCM. Apart from those service, any other service means FCM, otherwise it will be RCM provision that you need to apply. Okay. So purely application only it will be. So you need to remember the provision. This is like a formula. You need to remember the provision and you need to apply it in the exam depending upon the situation that is given in the question. Then 13 subsection 4 in case of vouchers. So this 12 subsection 4, 13 subsection 4, 12.5, 13.5 and 12.6, 13.6 is common between goods and services. In case of vouchers, what will be taken as the time of supply? First, what is a voucher? Voucher is an instrument which is treated like a consideration against supply of goods or services. So voucher is neither goods nor services. It will be treated like an instrument and as a consideration for supply of goods or service. I am supplying some goods or services. For that supply of goods or services, you give me voucher. That is the consideration, which means that voucher you might have got from me as a gift, or you might have purchased from me. You understood or not? So voucher can be gift voucher, or the voucher can be purchased voucher. Whatever it may be, the voucher when you are giving it to me against supply of goods or services, that voucher will be treated as consideration. I'll give you one classic example. That is, you got one 500 rupees gift voucher of lifestyle garments. So you got a gift voucher of 500 rupees lifestyle garments. Now you are going to lifestyle garments and you are purchasing a dress, and the dress price is 1500 rupees, and you gave this 500 rupees voucher and you gave 1000 rupees. Now they will charge GST on 1500 or on 1000. They will charge GST on 1500 because 1000 rupees in cash, 500 rupees in voucher. That 500 rupees in voucher will also be treated as consideration. So they need to pay GST on 1500 rupees only, not on 1000 rupees. You understood or not? Even though that 500 rupees is a gift voucher which they have given it to you, let it be, but voucher will be treated as a consideration against supply of goods or services. So as such, voucher is neither goods nor services, but it will be treated as consideration against supply of goods or services. So these vouchers are divided into two parts: identifiable vouchers and non-identifiable vouchers. In case of identifiable vouchers, we need to take at the time of issuance of voucher as the time of supply. So today I am giving the voucher. So today is the time of supply, and I need to pay GST because I know against which product you will be redeeming. Today itself I know against which product you will be redeeming. So therefore, whatever is the rate applicable to that product, I will pay GST on that voucher. Okay. And what will be taken as the value of the voucher? We discussed the in value of supply. So rule 32, sub rule 6, what does it says? See the value of the product against which this voucher will be redeemed. So take the value of the product as the value of the voucher and you pay GST today itself. In case of non-identifiable voucher, at the time of redemption. So whenever the person redeems that voucher, so that date will be taken. Okay. At the time of redemption will be taken as the time of supply. So which means today I will give the voucher. That voucher contains an amount 500 rupees that can be redeemed against any product sold by me. So therefore, whenever he redeems, then only I will know against which product he is redeeming. So therefore, I will not pay GST now. I will pay GST whenever he redeems it. Now, in case of identifiable voucher, already I pay the GST at the time of issuance of voucher. He is not redeeming at all, but unnecessarily I paid GST. Now, what if he is not redeeming at all and the voucher got expired? Now, whatever GST I paid, that is excess payment of GST without making any supply. So, I will get it as a refund. That GST whatever I paid on the sale of voucher, issuance of voucher, supply is not made, so I will get the refund of the GST paid. Whereas in case of non-identifiable voucher, first of all I will not pay GST till the time he redeems it. So therefore, if he is not redeeming at all and if the voucher is expired, then I don't have to pay any GST. Okay. So that is this section 12 subsection 4 and 13 subsection 4 in case of identifiable voucher at the time of issuance of voucher, non-identifiable voucher at the time of redemption of voucher. Okay, yeah. Then 12.5 and 13.5, when the time of supply is not ascertainable as per any of the above subsection. Why it is not ascertainable? Maybe the transactions are not available in the records. So it is an evasion. So mainly 12.5 and 13.5 will come in case of evasion. A person has evaded payment of tax. Now, mainly this time of supply is to determine the rate of GST, not to determine the due date, because already you would have crossed the due dates and all. So therefore, mainly to determine the rate at which GST is payable. Now say for example, department conducted the audit, okay, and when department conducted the audit, they have gone through the bank statement and they identified a credit of 25,000 rupees. But for the 25,000 rupees, there is no records that are available. And the 25,000 rupees is considered as the income of that particular supplier. Now, this particular income of the supplier, what should be taken as the rate of GST? So now, whether he is filing any periodical returns or not, whether that supplier is filing any periodical returns, yes. So which month it is identified? June month. For June month, what is the due date of filing return? So 20th of July. So on 20th of July, whatever is the rate applicable for that income, so that GST rate will be taken. So today, maybe the audit may be conducted after 2 years or 3 years. So as on that date, that is, whenever the audit is conducted, for example, that particular service is taxable at 5% whenever the audit is conducted. But we should not take that. So we need to see that 25,000 rupees which was credited 2 years before, and that month what is the due date of filing return? So July 20th. July 20th, this service, what was the rate? July 20th, at that time, 2 years before, 18%. Take 18%. For that reason only this is given, okay? That is, so periodical return has been filed, due date of filing such return. Suppose if he is not filing periodical return here, then today he is paying GST now on that 25,000. So for that, what is the rate applicable? So 18% or 12% or 5%, that he will pay, simple. So as on the date when he pays GST to the government, so what is the effective rate? So that rate he will pay GST, okay? That is this. Then 12 subsection 6 and 13 subsection 6. So there is one query, great here. So someone is listening live and they are asking query, super. So if Google Pay gives gift voucher for Swiggy of rupees 200, then what will be the time of supply? It is not an identifiable voucher. So because it can be redeemed against what? It can be redeemed against what? So it can be redeemed against any product or service offered by Swiggy, correct? It can be redeemed against purchase of some product, or it can be, that is a product, and that product may be taxable or that product may be exempted, or it can be redeemed against delivery charges. It can be redeemed against anything. So in that case, we will be taking it as non-identifiable voucher, and at the time of redemption will be taken as the time of supply, not at the time of issuance of voucher, okay? So there should be a specific product. So if there is a money, usually it is considered as a non-identifiable voucher, okay? So now who will pay GST in this case? Who gave that voucher? So Swiggy gave that voucher. Assuming that Swiggy gave that voucher, so at the time of redemption only it will be. For example, it will be redeemed against purchase of some food items. So the value of the food item is 400 rupees. So for that 400, this 200 is adjusted, but the GST is payable on 400 rupees only, okay? So that is this. And then 13 subsection 6 and 12 subsection 6. In case of addition to the value in the form of interest, late fee, penalty, etc. for delay in receipt of consideration, this point already I told you in value of supply, that we need to pay GST on what basis? We need to pay GST on receipt basis. We need to pay GST on receipt basis, okay? So for example, interest we are charging, but he did not pay interest. He paid the value, but he need to pay interest. That interest he is paying after 6 months. So no need to pay GST now on that interest. After 6 months only, whenever he returns that interest component, so at that time only we need to give debit note and we need to pay GST. Okay. So on receipt basis. This is about time of supply in case of FCM, RCM, vouchers, any residual cases, and interest or late fee or penalty. Now related to this, there are some additional points. Okay. What should be considered as the date of payment? From supplier point of view, if you see the date of entry in the books of supplier or date of credit in the bank account of the supplier, whichever is earlier. From recipient point of view, if you see date of entry in the books of recipient or date of debit in his bank account, whichever is earlier. Because if you see FCM, we need to see from supplier point of view. In case of RCM, we need to see from recipient point of view. So entry date is common. So, but in case of supplier, supplier's bank account gets credited, and in case of recipient's bank account gets debited. So, whichever is earlier will be taken. Understood? And then, in case of goods covered under FCM, on advances GST not payable, and GST payable only upon invoice, as the time of supply is due date of invoice or actual date of invoice, whichever is earlier. But in case of services under FCM, GST payable on advances. Okay, that point we already discussed. Then there is one special case, that is up to 1000 rupees received in excess. Sir, is coupon code for purchase a book will be considered as voucher? Yes. Coupon code will be considered as a voucher. Yes, it will be considered as a voucher, and therefore GST will be payable on the full value of the book. GST will be payable on full value of the book, even if some 200 rupees or 300 rupees coupon code is being given, it will be taken. But there is a debate right now, why can't it be treated as discount? But this debate is being discussed in the court. So therefore, until that point of time, we don't have to break our head. But many people are arguing that it can be treated as a discount. So therefore, I don't have to pay GST on that. But this voucher versus discount is a never-ending debate, and some court should interfere. Maybe Supreme Court or CBIC should interfere, and they need to give a clarity related to this. Okay, fine. Now see this. Up to 1000 rupees received in excess. What is that, sir? That is, sir, services. Only in case of services we need to pay GST on advance, not in case of goods. Services covered under FCM. I raised a bill. Say I am a telecom operator, I raised a bill, and bill is for 1523. That person has paid 2000 rupees. So some excess amount is received. So when that excess amount is received, if you follow the normal provisions of time of supply, so payment received date or invoice date, invoice will be in future. For that excess amount what we received this month, we will raise invoice in the next month only na. So therefore payment received date or invoice date, whichever is earlier, will be taken as the time of supply. So therefore this month only we need to pay tax, even with respect to that excess amount beyond the invoice we received. But there is an option. If that excess amount that we have received is up to 1000 rupees per invoice. So in this example it is up to 1000 rupees excess amount. Yes, excess amount is up to 1000 rupees. So 1523 is the invoice. We received 2000 rupees. So excess is only 477. That 477 is up to 1000 rupees. In that case, no need to apply the general provision, that is invoice date or payment date, whichever is earlier. You go for date of invoice itself as the time of supply. So when we will give invoice, next month we will give invoice for the excess amount received this month na. So next month itself we will pay GST. We don't have to pay GST now. That is this, up to 1000 rupees in excess received. See that. Up to 1000 rupees received in excess of the invoice. In case of services covered under FCM, time of supply can be date of invoice or determined as per 13 subsection 2. So supplier has option to choose. Either they can take date of invoice, okay, either they can take date of invoice or they can take determined as per 13 subsection 2. So supplier has the option to choose between these two. Okay. Then number 4, in case of supply of services between associated enterprises, import of services from associated enterprises. Generally, in case of import of service, what is the time of supply? Import of service covered under RCM. So the time of supply is the date on which payment is made to supplier, or 61st day from the date of invoice, whichever is earlier. But in case of associated enterprises, there won't be any invoice concept and all. That's why the date on which payment is made to supplier or the date of entry in the books of the recipient, whichever is earlier, because associated enterprises will not give any invoice. That's why that 61st day from the date of invoice is not there. In that place, the date of entry in the books of recipient is taken. Please check. So in case of supply of service between associated enterprises, where supplier is outside India and recipient is in India, time of supply shall be date of entry in the books of recipient or date of payment to supplier, whichever is earlier. Instead of 61st day from the date of invoice, we will take date of entry in the books of recipient. That's the only change here. Okay. Then next, this 31 subsection 7.1 point is there now. What is that? If goods are taken for sale on approval or on return basis, so we need to take the due date of invoice as the date on which supply actually takes place, or 6 months from the date of removal, whichever is earlier. Actually, this point is applied in case of goods taken outside India for exhibition. When goods are taken outside India for exhibition, at the time when it is taken outside India, it is not a supply, consequently not treated as zero rated supply. However, if it is not brought back within 6 months, it is treated as supply as per section 31 subsection 7. The concept of sale on approval or on return basis is applied in case of goods taken outside India for exhibition. So therefore, when they are taking the goods outside India for exhibition, they should ensure that the goods are returned within 6 months or it should have been sold there. Otherwise, unnecessarily the deeming fiction will apply and it will become supply. Okay. So when goods are taken outside India for exhibition, it is not a supply, but when the same is not brought back within 6 months, it is deemed to be supply in terms of 31 subsection 7. Then what is continuous supply of service? We already discussed. It takes more than 3 months and involves periodic payment obligations. So these are the points related to time of supply 12 and 13 that we need to know. Then we have time of supply in case of change in rate. Yes, associated enterprises includes deemed associated enterprises as per Income Tax Act. So this associated enterprises meaning is derived from Income Tax Act only, that includes deemed to be associated. Okay. And whatever is the associated enterprise as per section 92A of the Income Tax Act, the same needs to be applied here. Done. And then section 14, time of supply in case of change in rate. But remember, this section 14 is applicable only in case of services. Even though as per law, if you see that this time of supply in case of change in rate is applicable for both goods and services, but there is a notification 66/2017 which is in force. That notification 66/2017 says that the time of supply in case of change in rate is applicable only in case of services, because section notification 66/2017 says that time of supply in case of goods shall be due date of invoice or actual date of invoice, whichever is earlier, including the situations covered under section 14. So therefore, we need to go for due date of invoice or actual date of invoice, whichever is earlier only, even if there is a change in rate. So therefore, literally now that section 14 is applicable only in case of services. That too, when section 14 is applicable, between these three dates, that is date of completion, that is date of supply or date of invoice or date of payment, if there is a change in rate. What are the three dates? Between date of supply, date of invoice or date of payment. Between these three dates, if there is a change in rate, then we need to go for section 14. Okay. And we need to see whether supply is before change in rate or after change in rate. If the supply is before change in rate, very simple. Invoice date or payment date, whichever is earlier, will be taken as the time of supply. When the supply is before change in rate. If the supply is after change in rate, check whether both invoice and payment falls before change in rate. Yes, then invoice or payment, whichever is earlier. No, one date is before change in rate, one date is after change in rate. Then whichever is later. Okay. So if both are before change in rate, whichever is earlier, which both. So supply is fixed here. What is variable? Invoice and payment is only variable. Okay, so supply is fixed. Supply is after change in rate. If both invoice and payment is before change in rate, whichever is earlier. Otherwise, whichever is later. And you need to know one important point in this regard. What should be taken as the date of payment? Generally, date of payment means what? Date of entry in the books or date of credit in the bank account, whichever is earlier. But what they are telling is that this date of entry or date of credit in the bank account, whichever is earlier, will be taken as date of payment if the payment is credited within 4 working days from the change in rate. If the payment is credited within 4 working days from the change in rate, then only entry date or credit date, whichever is earlier. If the payment is not credited within 4 working days, because people try to manipulate. So what they will do, they will unnecessarily pass a journal entry that receipt date. So they will pass some journal entry so that the payment is received, but the credit will happen after 1 year. So then the entry date only will be taken as the date of payment received. That's why they brought this point. If the payment is not received within, that is not credited in the bank account within 4 working days from change in rate, then the date on which it gets credited only will be taken as the date of payment. Okay. So date of credit in bank account if the payment gets credited after 4 working days from change in rate. So this is with respect to section 14. Okay. And so we are discussing one question related to section 14 which is of November 2020 exam. So one good question. So November 2020 they gave one question on advances and many students got confused with respect to that question. So I am discussing that question. So see this quickly, we will see. This is the question. So Messrs Houseful Convention Hall is in the business of letting out its halls for functions. It provides you with the following information for determining the amount of refund out of advance received based on time of supply for one of its clients. Advance paid at the time of booking the hall for a function from 1st to 3rd November is that is the date on which advance received or advance paid is 16/7 1 lakh rupees, and additional deposit paid on 18/8/2019 for 2 lakhs. Function is held as scheduled on 1st November to 3rd November 2019 and invoice is issued taxable value 25/11/2019 2,50,000. Consider that there is a change in rate of tax on 15th October 2019 from CGST 2.5, SGST 2.5 to CGST 9 and SGST 9. What would be the amount of refund payable to the client? So this is the question. Actually what we need to do is that simple. First we need to determine the date of supply. The date of supply is 3rd November 2019. That is the date of supply. And what is the date of invoice? The date of invoice is 25/11/2019. And what is the date on which payment is received? There are two payments that are received. Advance payment 16/7 and balance payment is not there. So payment received date is 16/7. Now what is the change in rate? 15th October. So between these three dates, that is date of supply 3rd November, invoice 25 November and payment date 16 July, is there a change in rate between these three dates? Yes. So because the change in rate happened from 15th October 2019, so there is a change in rate. So supply is before change in rate or after change in rate? The supply is completed before change in rate or after change in rate? Sir, supply is completed after change in rate. When supply is completed after change in rate, check whether both invoice and payment before change in rate. No, invoice is after change in rate, payment is before change in rate. So what should be taken as the time of supply? If supply is after change in rate and both invoice and payment is not before change in rate, invoice date or payment date, whichever is later, should be taken. Whichever is later is what? That is 25/11/2019 will be taken. As on 25/11/2019, what is the effective rate? 9% and 9%, 18% is the effective rate. So we should take 2,50,000 plus 18%. Why 2,50,000 plus 18%? Because the taxable value is 2,50,000, means only taxable value. So GST will be on the top of it. So 2,95,000 will be the total amount that he need to pay. But how much already he paid? So 2 lakhs and 1 lakh already he paid. See, these two amounts are before change in rate. So already he paid. So minus 3 lakhs. So therefore we need to give a refund of 5,000 rupees. Simple. So once you determine the rate as per section 14, it is just an application. 5,000 rupees we need to give as a refund in this case. Suppose if the question is what is the excess GST that needs to be paid? On advance already we would have paid GST. So 3 lakhs into 5 by 105. 5 by 105 already we would have paid GST. 14,285.7, 14,286 already we would have paid GST. Now we need to pay 2,50,000 into 18%. So minus 14,286. 2,50,000 into 18% minus 14,286. So 30,714 will be the excess GST that we need to pay. Got it? So that's how a question can be asked on section 14. Then Are loyalty points considered as vouchers, sir? Sir, yes, sir. Loyalty points is also considered as vouchers because that can be redeemed against purchase of any product. So, first using loyalty points, they can purchase any product. So, that will also be considered. For example, you are going to a shop and you are regularly purchasing in that shop. They are giving you some loyalty points, and that loyalty points you are converting for purchase. So now in that case, whether they need to pay, for example, 100 rupees you have you have converted. So now the product is 500 rupees and 100 rupees you converted, which means that you are paying only 400, but they need to pay GST on 500, not on 400. Okay. So with this we will stop for today, and we have in the next class we will see invoice, that is various documents related to invoice, e-invoicing, etc. The agenda for the next class, that is tomorrow, is that we will be completing this various documents involved in GST, e-invoicing, etc. And then we will proceed to an important topic, that is place of supply. So time of supply is over. We will be learning about place of supply, and if time permits we will be discussing taxable event under GST also. So that's the agenda for tomorrow's session. Okay. So first, what are the various documents involved in GST? So you can check that in page number 36. In page number 36 you can see that what are the various documents involved in GST. So first, tax invoice, already we know. Tax invoice will be issued by whom to whom? Supplier by recipient. But in some cases, the recipient will be giving the tax invoice to the supplier. In which case, whenever the recipient is registered and liable to pay GST under RCM and the supplier is unregistered, so recipient will be giving a tax invoice to the supplier. Okay. So generally, supplier will be giving tax invoice to the recipient, but in some exceptional cases, recipient will be giving tax invoice to the supplier, that is when the supplier is covered under RCM and the supplier is unregistered and the recipient is registered in that case. But the time limit will be the same as the regular time limit for the tax invoice. And tax invoice is issued in case of taxable supplies. So supply of taxable goods and taxable services. Okay. And bill of supply. Bill of supply is in case of exempted supplies. In case of taxable supplies, tax invoice. In case of exempted supplies, bill of supply. Even if a person is covered under composition scheme, the document will be known as bill of supply only, because they cannot charge GST to the customer due to that reason. And that will be given by, again, supplier to recipient. And then in case of low value supplies, low value supply means value of the supply does not exceed 200 or less than 200. This is where generally students will get confused in MCQs. It is less than 200. It's not less than or equal to 200. It is less than 200. So in case of low value supply, that is value of each supply less than 200 rupees. So tax invoice is not required. But there is an exception to that. The exception is in case of cinema theatre, entry tickets in a multiplex theatre, even if the ticket price is less than 200 rupees, but tax invoice is required to be issued. In that case, the tax invoice will be nothing but called as e-ticket. So e-ticket is deemed to be tax invoice. Understood or not? So again I am repeating, in case of low value supplies, that is value of supply less than 200 rupees, generally tax invoice is not required. But if the value of if it is entry ticket in a cinema theatre, multiplex cinema theatre, even if the value of supply is less than 200 rupees, invoice is required to be issued. What will be taken as invoice in that case? E-ticket will be deemed to be invoice. And when this provision will be applicable, B2B or B2C? Only in case of B2C, not in case of B2B. And B2C, and second condition is that recipient do not require tax invoice. Third condition is that a consolidated tax invoice should be prepared at the end of the day, not for issuing the tax invoice, just for accounting purposes they need to prepare a consolidated tax invoice at the end of the day. That is this low value supply related point. Then debit note and credit note, already we discussed in value of supply. So debit note is issued by supplier to recipient whenever the value of invoice increases. Debit note whenever the value of invoice decreases. Credit note, and there is no time limit for debit note, but there is a time limit for the credit note. And credit note to be issued in case for a financial year by 30th September of the succeeding financial year or date of filing annual return, whichever is earlier. And remember that credit note cannot be issued in case of bad debts, but credit note can be issued whenever there is a reduction in the invoice value. Suppose if we collected excess tax also, we can give a credit note, and in case of sales returns also we can give credit note. In case of deficiency in the quality of the goods or services, then also we can give credit note. But remember, credit note cannot be issued in case of bad debts. That is given as per CBIC FAQ. Then revised tax invoice. So revised tax invoice is for making the supplies from the period when you are liable to get registered till the date you get certificate of registration. So when a person is liable to get registered, immediately they will not apply for registration and immediately registration will not be granted. From the date they are liable to get registered till the date they get registration certificate, they are required to pay GST on their outward supplies, but they cannot recover the GST as and when supply takes place, because till registration certificate they get, they will not get the tax invoice. So due to that reason, so after they get the registration certificate, they will be giving a revised tax invoice for the supplies which is made before the registration, that is between the date they are liable to get registered and they actually got registered. For that period, whatever is the supplies, for that supplies they will be giving a revised tax invoice, and that revised tax invoice to be given within 1 month. Okay, every registered person has been granted registration with effect from a date earlier than the issuance of certificate of registration. So when it will happen? In case they are making application for registration within 30 days, the effective date of registration will be the date they are liable to get registered. Sir, whenever a person is liable to get registered, they need to make application for registration within 30 days. If they make application for registration within 30 days, the date when they are liable to get registered is the effective date of registration. And the actual date of registration certificate will be later date. So for that period only revised tax invoice can be given. What if registration application is not made within 30 days from the date when they are liable to get registered? The date on which registration certificate is granted will be taken as the effective date of registration, and revised tax invoice cannot be issued in that case. So revised tax invoice can be issued only if the application for registration is made within 30 days, and that revised tax invoice should be issued within 1 month from the end of the date on which registration certificate is granted. So don't get confused with respect to this 30 days and 1 month. First you need to make application for registration within 30 days, and thereafter you will get registration certificate after a later date, and from the date when you get the registration certificate within 1 month you need to give revised tax invoice for the supplies between, for the outward supplies between the effective date of registration till the date of certificate of registration. But this facility is not possible if the invoice is not issued. That is, revised tax invoice cannot be issued if application for registration is not made within 30 days from the date when liability to register arises. Okay, time limit within 1 month from the date of certificate of registration. So this point is important, what is taken as the effective date of registration. Then receipt voucher. Receipt voucher is given in case when an advance is received. What is an advance? Any amount that is received before the date of invoice is known as advance. Any amount that is received before the date of invoice is known as advance. In case of advance, supplier should be giving a receipt voucher to the recipient, and that receipt voucher should contain the details of the advance whatever is being collected from the recipient, and whether GST payable on the basis of receipt voucher. Yes in case of services, no in case of goods, because in case of service only we need to pay GST on the basis of invoice date or payment date, whichever is earlier. But in case of goods, it is actual date of invoice or due date of invoice, whichever is earlier, so we don't have to pay. What about a composition scheme? First of all, in case of composition scheme where there is tax invoice, there is only bill of supply, correct, and they need to pay GST definitely on the advances. That is about receipt voucher. So they have not specified the time limit, but the time limit is not there, but immediately as and when the advance is received, the receipt voucher should be given. Then refund voucher. Refund voucher is whenever we give the receipt voucher and the invoice is not yet issued, but that supply is cancelled. In the case when supply is cancelled, that advance will be returned. For returning that advance, a refund voucher should be given by supplier to recipient. And whenever the refund voucher is given, on the basis of receipt voucher, if already the tax is paid, on the basis of receipt voucher, if the tax is already paid, whenever the refund voucher is given to the recipient, whatever the tax which is already paid, they will be getting as a refund. Okay, so that is this, and this information only I just gave as a chart in page number 39. So from the date of invoice, before the date of invoice, if any payment is received, it is known as advance. So supplier shall issue receipt voucher to the recipient, and in case of goods, GST not payable. In case of service, GST is payable. And when the payment is received after the date of invoice, receipt voucher may be issued. It is not compulsory to issue a receipt voucher. Receipt voucher may be issued because already invoice has been issued by that time, and GST is already paid based on invoice. Now what happens? Before the date of invoice, the amount is refunded. when the amount is refunded, supplier shall issue a refund voucher. So what will happen? If the GST is already paid, they will get it as a refund. Suppose if the amount is refunded after the date of invoice, in that case there are two options. Either they can give a credit note. So credit note can be given by supplier to recipient. So whenever credit note is given by supplier to recipient, the supplier's liability will come down. Or option 2 is there. What is option 2? Rather than giving a credit note, they can go for refund. So refund of excess payment of tax. Under that category they can go. There are two options available. Okay. This is based on the recent circular. This is based on the recent circular related to this. And that is about refund voucher. On the other hand, there is something called as payment voucher. Payment voucher is given by recipient to supplier, not by supplier to recipient. Recipient to supplier will be giving this payment voucher in case of RCM. So in case of RCM, whenever recipient is making payment to the supplier, recipient has to give a payment voucher to the supplier, evidencing the payment that has been made to the supplier. And in case of supplier being unregistered, the payment voucher will come, or always? Always. See, invoice only given by recipient to supplier when the supplier is unregistered. But payment voucher will always come whether the supplier is registered or unregistered. But it should be covered under RCM. Okay. And then there is something called as delivery challan. Delivery challan is a document which will be given when the goods are being moved from one place to another place without involving supply. For example, transportation of liquid gas, where quantity of supply at the time of removal is not known. Depending upon the quantity requirement at a later stage only, we can be raising the invoice. So in that case, so what is that we need to do? So we need to raise the invoice as and when the actual supply takes place. But until that point of time, we are moving the goods now. So that should accompany a delivery challan. So supply of liquid gas where the quantity at the time of removal is not known. And transportation of goods for job work. So whenever the goods are sent on job work, okay, whenever the goods are sent on job work, so in that case also it is not a supply, but an invoice is not required. So that's why delivery challan, because the goods are moving from one location to another location. And transportation of goods by reason other than supply, say within the state from factory to depot the goods are being transported, or within the state from one place to another place the goods are being transported, and that is not supply, means they have not obtained separate registrations within the state. So then also delivery challan is only required, tax invoice not required. Wherever tax invoice is not required, but the goods are being transported from one place to another place without involving any supply, so then in that case a delivery challan will be given by supplier to recipient. Okay. And then HSN code in invoice, this is an amendment. That is, previously we are required to enter 4 digits maximum, but now it is 6 digits. So for that they have modified. This is with effect from 1/4/2021. So that is applicable for your November exam. That is, aggregate turnover during previous year does not exceed 5 crores. Then they need to give an invoice. In that invoice, if it is B2B, they need to enter 4-digit HSN. If it is B2C, optional. If they want to enter, they can enter, otherwise not required. Whereas in case when the aggregate turnover exceeds 5 crores during the previous year, let it be B2B or B2C, the number of digits that they need to enter will be 6 digits. Okay, understood. For B2B it is 4 digits, for both B2B and B2C it will be 6 digits. And then next, e-invoice. Obtaining the following from the invoice registration portal with respect to a normal tax invoice is known as e-invoice. That is, there is a normal tax invoice, then paper is there. So one paper is there here. On this paper, there are 3 things that are required. This is one normal paper. This is one stupid paper. So this is an invoice. On these 3 things should be there. Then it will be called as a e-invoice. What are the 3 things that should be there? So there should be, QR code. QR code should be there, and then invoice reference number should be there. One number, invoice reference number should be there, and digital signature should be there. Then this paper will be called as e-invoice. Very simple. So any tax invoice on which we get 3 things will be known as a e-invoice. What are the 3 things that we need to get? Number 1, we need to get QR code, invoice reference number, and digital signature. From where we will get this? We will get this from the invoice registration portal. Obtaining the following from invoice registration portal with respect to a normal tax invoice by uploading the JSON. So what is this JSON? JavaScript object notation. That is, you will convert the regular tax invoice. This paper is there na, tax invoice. This will be converted into one JavaScript object notation, one code, and that will be uploaded into the invoice registration portal. And the invoice registration portal will add these three things, and we will retrieve it and again convert back into a PDF. So that's where we will get a e-invoice. Got it? So three things. Remember these three things. What are the three things that should be there in case of e-invoice? Invoice reference number, QR code, and digital signature. And that will be given by a invoice registration portal. And to whom e-invoicing is applicable? Aggregate turnover in any year between 2017-18 to 2020-21. So any year, 2017-18, 18-19, 19-20, 20-21, full year of 2017-18. So any 1 year, if the aggregate turnover does not exceed 50 crores, so neither e-invoice nor dynamic QR code in invoice. E-invoice is different from dynamic QR code in invoice. Dynamic QR code in invoice is required in case of B2C supply. In case of B2B supply, e-invoice is required. In case of B2C, B2B e-invoice, B2C QR code. But whatever QR code that is there in e-invoice is different from dynamic QR code in B2C invoice. Don't get confused with respect to these two. So B2B invoice, we require e-invoice. B2C, dynamic QR code. But this dynamic QR code, whether we need to get from invoice registration portal, no. The dynamic QR code, lot of software service providers are there, or payment gateway service providers are there. The banks, financial institutions, or the payment gateways, they have developed a dynamic QR code application, and using the dynamic QR code application, they will be able to put it on the B2C invoice. So B2B e-invoice, B2C QR code in invoice. Okay. So in case of B2B or B2C, when the aggregate turnover during any of the preceding financial year from 2017-18 to 2020-21, it does not exceed 50 crores, nothing is required. They don't have to comply with any of the provisions. Suppose if the aggregate turnover during the previous year exceeds 50 crores, then in case of B2B, they need to give e-invoice. In case of B2C, QR code in invoice is not required. When the aggregate turnover during the previous year exceeds 500 crores, okay, exceeds 500 crores. In case of B2B, no doubt e-invoice is required. In case of B2C, QR code in invoice is required. Okay, this QR code in invoice is known as dynamic QR code. With respect to each invoice, that QR code will be unique, that will be generated, and it will not be a static QR code. And invoice should be in prescribed format. So what is the format in which we have to prepare the e-invoice? If at all the provisions of e-invoice is applicable, that should be as per a prescribed format. The format is prescribed in Form GST INV1, may be useful for MCQ purpose, and it is optional. Suppose if my aggregate turnover does not exceed 50 crores, so can I go for e-invoice? Yes, I can always go for e-invoice. There is no restriction. What is the objective of e-invoice? Why e-invoice is given? So e-invoice is given in order to eliminate the fake invoices, and once the e-invoice is uploaded into the invoice registration portal, from there the e-invoice will travel to three different places: GSTR1 and e-way bill, and GSTR 2A or 2B of the recipient. Okay, for the supplier it will automatically come in GSTR1, and at the time of preparing e-way bill, when they enter the invoice number, automatically it will get imported, and even GSTR 2A 2B it will automatically come. So that is the advantage of this e-invoice. And what is the e-invoice process? What is the e-invoice process? So you can see that in page number 41, you can see e-invoice process. So first what will happen? There will be a taxpayer. There will be a taxpayer, and what the taxpayer will do? So they will be preparing an invoice in their supplier's billing or ERP system, and they will be uploading that invoice, converting into JSON to invoice registration portal, and that invoice registration portal will be giving these three, and from there it will go to the GST system for reflecting in GSTR1 of the supplier and GSTR2B of the buyer, and so that the recipient can see that in their GSTR2B, and they can verify whether this invoice will be correct invoice or not. And this invoice which is issued to the buyer is only considered as a valid invoice if there is a e-invoicing provisions which are applicable to a person, but that person has not followed the e-invoice process. Then in that case, the invoice which is given will not be considered as a valid invoice, and that leads to an offense called as supply without invoice, and that will lead to even imprisonment, which we have already seen in relation to offenses and penalties. Okay, and irrespective of aggregate turnover, E-invoice and QR code not required in the following cases. SEZ unit or SEZ developer, banking company, financial institution or NBFC, insurance company, then goods transport agency, transportation of passengers, any mode. So let it be railways, airways, waterways, etc. Multiplex cinema theatre. Now there is a small change, that is, so for SEZ unit, QR code applicable. QR code applicable. For SEZ unit, QR code applicable. Okay. For SEZ unit, QR code applicable. And so for OIDR supplier located outside India and making supply to non-taxable online recipient and making supply to non-taxable online recipient, in that case QR code not required. QR code not required. It is B2C only. So there is a supplier located outside India, OIDR supplier, who is making supply to non-taxable online recipient. Where that non-taxable online recipient? In India. So in that case, QR code is not required. And SEZ unit, QR code is required in case of B2C. And what you need to remember is that, so first SEZ unit, first to whom e-invoice is not applicable. To whom e-invoice is not applicable, that we will remember. So that is SEZ unit, not SEZ developer, banking company, financial institution, NBFC, GTA, only GTA, not for other transportation of goods service providers, only for GTA, then any transportation of passenger service provider, and then multiplex cinema theatre and insurance company. So for these 6 cases, e-invoicing is not applicable, whatever may be the aggregate turnover. Same 6 cases, QR code also not applicable. What are the 6 cases? Except SEZ unit, and add another point, that is OIDR supplier located outside India making supply to non-taxable online recipient in India. Okay, here also 6, there also 6, but the difference is, so in case of e-invoicing, SEZ unit is there, and in case of QR code, SEZ unit is not there, but OIDR supplier located outside India and making supply to non-taxable online recipient in India is there. So this can be definitely be tested as to state whether in the following cases e-invoicing is required, state whether in the following cases QR code is required. Like that an MCQ can be created on this. So this is about various documents that are there in relation to tax invoice and the other documents. Okay.